Welcome back to We Want Winners. Roderick Adams here alongside me, Double G. We're still in our every 2 weeks mode with this podcast, with this video show. But soon enough, and I'm going to give you some dates here as far as key schedule dates. Soon enough, we're going to be back a little bit more frequently than we are. So the off season is almost behind us, which is kind of exciting to think about.
It really is. The rookies report tomorrow.
Exactly. We're also going to talk about this new podcast about Playcaller called Playcallers. And at least the first episode, because that's all I've heard, is about Kyle Shanahan and his coaching tree. And sadly, the beginning of the end and the end of Robert Griffin III's career. That was like the sad part of the podcast. But Kyle Shanahan's all over this new podcast series. I think the fifth and final episode just came out, so I'm a little bit behind. We're going to talk about that podcast. We'll also talk about possible positional battles for training camp. But first, let's kick off the show talking about these key dates for what is upcoming in 49er football. So I have it that the rookies report on the 18th, but you're saying they report on the 17th.
No, you're right. I'm a day behind. Tuesday, not
yes.
It's the 16th. It's not the 17th.
Yeah. So on the 18th, the rookies report, and on the 26th, training camp officially begins, and that is the first of 9 open practices that fans will be able to see. And this is something that we've talked about with you, that you're very interested in getting back. Have you successfully found an in to some of these practices yet?
All 9 tickets. Shout out Robert Ramos. Cooked me all the way up. I am good. And it turns out is a good thing because they go on sale to the public tomorrow, I believe. The 17th, yes. And there are already dates that are sold out. So,
oh my gosh.
Yep. So shout out to Robert for getting me all squared away early. So yeah, I'll be there in full force.
How hot does it get out there?
It gets pretty
oh man.
It gets pretty stinking hot. Yeah. And then there's like it's kind of a shit show. There's no beverage. They got water out there. Last year they were telling you, like, the first practice they were like, no food, only water, and you could bring fruit in like a Ziploc bag. But by the time all the rest of the days I went, I took Subway every day and nobody tripped. So it was a pretty interesting experience, and I'm really looking forward to it again. They're really strict on the rules. If you guys, whatever their rules are, other than the food, obviously, you need to try to follow them.
Can't be shooting video of Kyle's new play, man.
Man, look, that is a huge one. You can video the warm-ups, and you can video the individual position practices. But once they go into install and team, if they see a camera, they will throw your ass out, and they are serious about it too. I saw them, roll several people about the club trying to sneak film Kyle's plays. And don't.
I wonder how many of those are people who have like Substacks, or like they have these like subscription based platforms where you kind of need content, right? Like if you have a fan base of hardcore 49er fans who are trying to learn more, and you try and sneak a video or something, and nobody finds it.
What's interesting is that would make sense for them, maybe, but you can definitely see people like Lombardi and Mayoko, who you see them out there who'd have like really close access out there on the sideline. You could understand why they wouldn't want to do anything to screw up their access.
Oh yeah.
Because they're, like you say, their platform is much larger than Substack guys. So if Kyle found out that they were filming, it'd be a huge problem, and they probably get their access pulled, which they obviously, to do their job, they really can't afford to be barred from the facility.
Yeah, they would also probably get a couple of chances, whereas random fan who,
Right.
Doesn't have any relationship with the team wouldn't.
And I mean, I don't think there's nothing that says that. I mean, if you are savvy enough to know what's going on, I don't, I don't know that. Well, I guess other than ruining the relationship, there's nothing to keep you from describing what's happening. I don't know. Again, Kyle's whole thing is he doesn't want his shit out there in the street. He doesn't want people
Yeah.
knowing what he's doing. And I think even that, if you were somebody like Lombardi or B-Rose, you wouldn't want to be the one that's like spilling what the
Yeah.
hell is coming. So
Mayoko. Can you imagine
nah,
Mayoko gets in
that
trouble?
that would be crazy. But yeah, it watching those coaches, for me, who's just kind of a football nerd, it's really fascinating to watch those dudes work and to see how what we watch on Sundays, how it kind of matters. Because this is the only time we get to see how that the preparation for what happens on Sundays, how it happens. We, obviously we don't get any access like game weeks or anything like that. But we're getting to see in real time them installing the offense and the defense, and kind of you hints of what it's going to look like when the lights come on. So I think that's fascinating.
Why? I wonder why the NFL allows for this stuff, because I don't think the NBA allows any open practices anymore. That's a fully closed door policy there.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time. The only team that I have any kind of real knowledge about is the Warriors, and I can't remember the last time there was an open Warrior practice.
Like media day, I think you used to be able to do that, but then once the practice actually starts, then they kind of shush you out. Like if you want to watch warm-ups or you want to watch some of the one-on-one stuff with the trainers, but then once Kerr's out there with the whistle, then it's like, all right, everyone's got to go. You know, it's interesting. I've mentioned this before on different podcasts, but I had a chance to talk to Jim Barnett, the old Warriors color announcer.
Mm-hmm.
And this is during time frame right before Kerr gets hired. So Mark Jackson is about to get fired. And Barnett is essentially telling us so without saying it. It was right around that time. And he said that Mark Jackson was so insecure about his job that he didn't even let Jerry West watch practice. And I'm assuming it's because he didn't want the feedback, or he didn't want the gossip around how he was doing it with the management. And, so much so that, Mark Jackson actually had one of his meetings bugged and a coach got fired because they were trying to record a conversation. And so, yeah, there was like lots of craziness around there. But I mean, it makes sense. Like if you in NBA, like imagine, to bring this up. Well, Brian and I think are coming back this week with the death lineup, but imagine somebody being in the practice facility when Draymond Green punched Jordan Poole in the face.
Yeah.
Like that would have been even crazier than the moment was when, it's still kind of nuts that.
And that's why it's weird that tape got out.
And that they never found out who did it, or maybe they did and they just aren't saying it, because how can
I can't imagine that they don't know, because I just think based on what the beginning of the conversation, I think that there's probably a very, very small list of people who were even there.
Yeah.
So by process of elimination, it had to be, I can't imagine how many people it was, but I can't imagine it would be 25. I can't imagine that there are that many people who aren't, and I can't imagine there's anybody there that wouldn't be considered an insider.
Yeah. And, of course, TMZ is not going to give up who did it. And,
right.
The cell phone has tracking information, but, that there, I don't know how much you could actually get into that. But, okay, so the rest of these dates. So I said July 26th, training camp opens. And then the first preseason game is less than a month away.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's awesome.
In Las Vegas against the Raiders, August 13th. And then August 19th, the first of two home preseason games, first against Denver, and then the 25th is against San Diego. Now, the way that the new bargaining agreement works between the owners and the players is they added a 17th game, and one of the concessions was the player said, well, we don't want to play all of these preseason games, so now there's only 3 of them. So that's good because the preseason sometimes can be long, but between the last preseason game and the first regular season game, it is like over 2 weeks. So that's going to be a long wait. We're going to be chomping at the bit to get 49er football opening up against Pittsburgh on the 10th. And then I just added this because the home opener, the Niners usually play away early in the season because of the sun issues at Levi's. Their home opener, I believe this is a Thursday night game, which is great because night games at Levi's are amazing against the New York Giants. So those are our key dates, and it just means that we are sooner than later going to be talking about real stuff, which is exciting. And Shelvin, he wants to go to Vegas, man. He's like, let's go. Like NBA had their summer league. We need our summer preseason NFL.
Man, if Shelvin, if you're gonna roll, I might consider it. Man, I love Vegas, but man, August is, and I know for Shelvin from where he's coming from,
yeah, he's like,
it's probably gonna be cooler than where he's at. But if you're gonna roll, Shelvin, we'll get up offline, and I might make that trip. If you go, I'll go.
That'd be fun. Yeah. I've not been to the football stadium in Vegas, but I've been to the T-Mobile a couple different times.
I haven't been to this. I went on a tour. I haven't been to an actual game though. It's state of the art. It's a beautiful facility, which is shocking that with an outfit that is headed by Mark Davis, that they were able to come up with something. So clearly he didn't have anything to do with the design of the place, because it's a magnificent facility.
By the way,
and the whole grass thing is it's amazing with the trays and how they slide it in and slide it out. It's really, really cool. If you're ever in Vegas and are looking for something to do or tired of spending money at the blackjack table, that stadium tour,
they do like daily tours.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, mm-hmm. Cool. We're already getting off topic, but I wanted to ask you if you've seen the Sphere in Vegas.
Oh my God! The first time I saw, I didn't know anything about it. I'm driving up Twain Boulevard, which is where it's located. It's like right between that. It's like, that's my old stomping grounds. It's like right in front of the Wynn parking garage, and I worked at Wynn for 5 years. So that's like my spot. I'm pulling down. I'm driving down Twain, and I see this huge thing, and I'm half expecting it to shoot out a laser beam and blow up Alderaan. I mean, it is, it is truly the Death Star. It's but yeah, some of those pictures of the images on it were amazing. Like the eyeball, that was so goddamn scary. They for people who haven't seen it, it's like a huge ball, and they are going to do concerts and like basketball games.
It's supposed to be specifically for concerts as far as the acoustics and where the speakers and everything is situated.
It's an MSG property. And it's really amazing. And some of the graphics they're able to do it, like the globe is like, that's like a slam dunk. But they had this one graphic on there. It was like a big, huge eyeball with all the detail. And it was kind of unsettling.
It was really gross because the LCD screens, or I don't know how many LCD screens make up that whole thing, but
it's got to be a lot. But yeah, it's a really, really, it's an interesting thing. I guess there's supposed to be one in London too. But it's really cool.
All right, let's talk about some of the training camp positional battles that.
Can we? I'm sorry, I don't want to get off topic, but we kind of slid past Playcallers.
Well, let's save it. I want to save it. Yeah,
okay.
We'll save it to the end.
Okay.
So let's go. Rod asked me if we could talk about this as a topic, and I think it's a good topic, especially as by the next time we record, training camp will have already started. So, yeah, I asked Rod to kind of choose, his top few of the ones he's got his eye on. And I have the depth chart open on one of the tabs on my computer. So I'm ready to go. Let's go with one of your first three.
I'm going to be stretching to get something offensive. Everything for me is on the defensive side.
Yeah.
So let's start up front at defensive end. Obviously we got, in my opinion, the best defensive end in football, playing on the left side, Nick. But what's going to happen on the right side is a huge question mark. There's really nobody there with any sort of sustained NFL success. There's a lot of talent over there. I mean, Drake Jackson showed some stuff in a short while he was playing last season, and the whole running out of gas thing is kind of troubling. But we expect him to be better prepared this year, and he clearly has talent. Cleveland Farrell, a disappointment in Oakland, but I mean, he was a 4th overall pick for a reason, so it's not like he's without talent. All those guys over there, you can make a case for. It's just that none of it does. Austin Bryant is a good measurables guy, but he's never put it together in the NFL. Beal is a nice prospect. I don't know exactly how much you can expect from a rookie, but so they're going to have a whole lot of guys to throw at it, and they should have a lot of opportunities with the fact that you're gonna have two guys on the front, with Hargraves and Bosa, who are going to command double teams. So those guys over there on the right side are going to have opportunities to make plays. So it's going to be interesting to see which one of them or a few of them separate themselves during camp to be the ones to get the first opportunity at that spot in the regular season. And I think it'll also end up being a very fluid situation that, I don't necessarily think that the person or persons who get that spot in the beginning are necessarily, tenured in there. And, I think it could, you could see a lot of movement on the depth chart as the season goes on. So I think that's going to be a fascinating battle to watch.
Yeah, and Shanahan has not been shy in, maybe publicly challenging Drake Jackson to kind of step it up. And he hit the rookie wall, and you've heard about the rookie wall. Some rookies are able to play through some of that stuff, but the difference between college football and the NFL is immense.
10 games, and he played. Well, we had an eligible, I think it was 21 games last year. So double the season for, and like you say, he just hit the wall. I mean, and I don't, not to make excuses. It's not an excuse. I mean, it's just a fact. I don't think somebody telling you can fully prepare you or explain what it's going to be like. So he had to experience it, and he did. And hopefully he took lessons from that and is able to, at least finish the season this year. Because he had like 6 DMPs at the end of the season, coach's decisions. I mean, that's crazy for somebody that they were clearly counting on.
Did you read David Lombardi's piece? This is probably last week, about Christian McCaffrey and Hargrave kind of being utilized in a way in that they have such great individual talent, but because of their individual talent, and he actually used the analogy for McCaffrey as like the Steph Curry of the offense, in that he attracts so much attention, it opens up stuff for other people. And he said similarly on the defensive side, Hargrave is kind of the same in that I forget the end for Philly who had his best year ever,
Reddick.
right next to Hargrave, and so he was saying that. Can you imagine Hargrave and Bosa together? And I was thinking sort of like what you thought, which is, oh, well, maybe that's the avenue in where Drake Jackson, kind of is able to show some stuff because the other two guys are going to be getting so much attention. So I think there's going to be tons of opportunities for him to make plays.
Yeah, I mean, all of them. I think Armstead is going to be a beneficiary because he's not going to be able to be the double in the middle, I would imagine. I just can't imagine Hargrave getting single block. He's just too good. But Armstead is no slouch. So I expect him to be a beneficiary. And then again, those guys on that other side, they won't be lacking opportunities. So I think, Kyle being how he is, he's not. That's why I say I don't know that whoever gets the opportunity first better produce, because they should have no reason not to. And I don't think there's going to be like a long leash of, allowing them to be that person that's over there starting to be to have a bunch of empty reps and not be productive. I just think the opportunities are too good. And there's too many guys there to just, next man up. We're just gonna keep rolling them through until somebody establishes themselves.
Where are you going next? Are you going linebacker for your next one?
We could do that. Well, yeah, let's do that. Well, no, actually, no. The one that's interesting to me is who ends up being the nickel and how they end up playing the nickel. Do they? Because I saw an article where Wilkes was big upping Oliver, and he has played well when he's played. His problem is that number one, he's been hurt like 3 of his 5 seasons. And those times when he wasn't hurt, the more he got above 300 snaps, the less effective he was. So the more he played, the less effective he was. His sweet spot as to this point in his career, if he at around 300 snaps, he's like a real top of the league player. But in those 2 seasons where he ended up playing 500 plus, it bore out that he was just kind of average. So we'll end up seeing. So Wilkes touted him as the best nickel on the market. And that might be true, I guess. But there was also talk about our draft pick Brown being a third safety and being out there with, him being, a big nickel, kind of like a la Jimmy Ward last season. So I guess both those things could be true. Oliver could get a lot of run. Brown could get a lot of run. But they're 2 completely different type of players. So who gets the snaps is gonna be pretty telling as to what we're prioritizing. And it might end up just being game plan dependent. Because obviously Oliver is going to be a much better cover corner. And while Brown can cover, he is more of a safety slash nickel. So he can give you some stuff, and he can also cover too, which he showed in college. But he can also play downhill and can, kind of play and be play and force in the run game, kind of like Jimmy Ward, who could cover, but his real forte was running, coming up and hitting people. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in terms of just how we are going to play as a defense. Because I thought, everything's old is new again. That 3 safety deal goes back to Fritz Shermer with the Packers. He was the first one I ever saw, and I don't know if it's older than that. It probably is. There's nothing new on his son. But, that big nickel package that they used with with Woodson in there, him giving them that versatility of being able to be a corner, but later in his career he was more of a safety, in-box safety. That's an interesting dynamic. So it's going to be. I'm very interested to see how that plays out.
And they're bringing back guys who have been in the system for a little bit. Ambry Thomas, our guy. Samuel, if you think you're lonely now, Womack. And then also guys who have been practice squatters and such, like Quantrez Knight. So, but Oliver was specifically brought over for this role,
right?
It seemed so. It's kind of he's kind of the 1A in that spot. But if the young rookie shows out, that is a very interesting battle.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was such a long time ago now, but there was a streak there where Womack was like playing out of his mind,
nose for the football.
Yeah, and then he, kind of like a rookie, he just kind of fell off. But it's going to be interesting to see. You mentioned Ambry Thomas? Is he in a Trey Sermon type situation? Does he? Is he like playing for his job at this point? Because he was the Amador Lenore not last season, but the season before.
Yeah,
he struggled early and then came on late and was, he was balling out in, at the end of the season, and then got hurt last year and just never. He just never established himself. So, but I think overall, you mentioned Knight and Womack, and we've got a lot of talented guys, got a lot of guys who have shown in flashes that they can play. I'm really fascinated with Knight's skill set. He's super fast and he's long and he's got all the measurables. So it'll be interesting to see if he's able to take that next step from the practice squad onto the active roster, to be able to, maybe contribute. And it's kind of nice to have, no disrespect to my man Dante Johnson, but it's not as like it's nice to have younger guys be in the mix for these positions and not having to kind of go back to the well with, and again, there's nothing, no disrespect to Dante Johnson. When he plays, he's played well. And I mean, his versatility was, of real service. But the faster you can get these younger guys in on these rookie deals,
yep,
and exploit them, at this cheap money and get reps out of them, the better. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see.
All right, what is your third one?
Guy, it has to be linebacker. That third,
it's not going to be kicker Zane Gonzales. He's just kind of hanging out just to hang out.
Oh man, I have been. It's funny you should mention that. I've been debating back and forth all week. I mean, God, I can. That is one circumstance. The kicker situation is one that I can argue both sides of. I get the 49ers side of it. I get Robbie Gould's side of it, and I don't got a dog in the fight because I love them both. But I mean, and I am rooting hard for Jake Moody to be the guy, but it is ridiculous to make the point that some 49er fans have that he is a better kicker than Robbie Gould. Is he even, which brought up another subset of points. Is he even an NFL player yet? Technically, I mean, it's possible to get drafted and not play. I mean,
I guess has he got to check it? That would actually.
Well, I get. Well, fair point. If he's been paid, then yes. Okay, fair point. But I would still say today, Robbie Gould was a better NFL kicker.
Oh yeah,
than Jake Moody.
100%. I think the whole season is going to be about, can Jake be 90% of Robbie Gould, right? Because Robbie Gould's one of the most consistent guys, one of the best kickers in 49er history.
Except now that's the thing. If you're making the case for Jake Moody, he is going to be an upgrade in the kickoff game from day one.
Yeah.
So I could, like I say, when you talk about making the argument from the 49ers side, I could see why you wouldn't want to pay $5 million to a guy who, just he was a subpar while he was a very good place kicker. He was basically unusable. He was literally bottom of the league in kickoffs last year. And I mean, when you're looking for edges as a winning team, I mean, that just it kills you. I mean, you really have to be able to put the ball in the end zone or be able to master that little pooch kick to where you guys can cover it. So I get that. You don't want to pay that dude $5 million. I mean,
or now you just kick it as high as humanly possible, and you get the fair catch.
Fair catch, exactly. So I mean, like you say, if Moody can just be 90% of Robbie as a place kicker, then we're good. But then the questions are always going to come still in December, January, and February when that's when you really make your money as a kicker because I mean, you got making those clutch kicks. I mean, it's a little different in November than it is in January. So it's levels to it, and just as a rookie, he's gonna have to go through those levels of proving himself, I guess, to himself and to us that he can. We're done it now. It's over. We've made the choice. Now it's just about living, living with it and seeing if they were right, if they made the right call. So I'm rooting for him, but I there's a part of me that still wishes Robbie was here.
Yeah, I think Shelvin and I are gonna miss Robbie just because we would celebrate every
MVP,
every possible kick by him going back many years with the Niners. We're not that
We're
good.
Not very good.
That was like our celebration was like, oh, we got a field goal. There we go. All right, so let's move on to the linebacker situation. They have an open spot in their starting starting backer position. It is on the strong side. Oren Burks is in bold here with Flanagan Fowles kind of behind him on this ESPN chart that I have. And then other linebackers that they have at the different spots. But what do you see here?
Well, I've heard what is it? McClurry Ball. He is been said to be in the mix, and then also that is a position that if you're going to put that extra defensive back out there, that he's the guy that comes off. So excuse me, he's not going to get as many reps as the other two linebackers. So that's again, that kind of goes back to the other position is how often do we put that extra DB out there, and how often do we take that take that extra linebacker off the field?
Do you know it would have been nice to figure out what that percentage was last year when they had three guys that they really trusted out there.
Right. Yeah, because Al-Shaair was a monster, and he was really good anytime he had to play, when Greenlaw was out, or so he was a legit third player. So yeah, that would have been interesting homework to have done, to see what kind of percentage that third guy is out there. That was another thing that they covered, and we'll talk about a little bit more when we start talking about play callers. But one of the ways that they were talking about how Kyle has stayed ahead of the curve in that, and you're going to see more teams do it because of the way the cat and mouse between defense and offense. And what has happened is you're getting those linebackers out there. You need guys who can cover. So which subsequently means they're usually smaller, and you can kind of bully them. So we have been ahead of the curve in our being able to run, even when if it's a heavy box with these light ass linebackers, I mean, you can just run right over the top of them. So it's going to be interesting to see if we're able to hold up, which again, our defensive interior should be better with Hargraves and Armstead, but that was a problem for us with strong interior fronts who could get to the second level and kind of bang us around. Our ability to hold up in those lighter fronts with somebody like an Oliver in there is going to be very telling to me. Or do we need to keep somebody like Burks or whoever linebacker X is in there to be able to be solid versus the run, which I know is just based on our defenses. It's very important to the overall structure is our ability to be solid, in the box.
So when we get to preseason games here in less than a month, we'll circle back on all of this stuff because
did we do this? So we did the 3 preseason game last year.
I think
right?
so. I think so.
Yeah. So I'm just interested to see because you remember in the olden days, the 3rd game was the most important one. And then, the 4th game usually was guys that were trying to make the roster.
Yeah, it was like the 3rd one was like the dress rehearsal game.
Right. And I can't remember if that's I don't remember how it worked last year because like you had pointed out when going over the schedule that even if you decided to do that for that 3rd preseason game, it's so long between there and the actual first game that I don't know. I don't necessarily know how much benefit there is to like playing those guys like a whole like they used to do. I don't, the schedule really doesn't. I mean, because if you're gonna do that and then still be off another 2 weeks, I mean, I don't know. It'll be interesting. I don't even recall the last season was so long ago.
I know. I don't remember how they did it either. But also it's because, man, sometimes, they're I don't know if you've watched many baseball games this year, but it's like the games are so sped up. So you can get through a baseball game now in like 2.5 hours. It feels like preseason NFL games are like 7 hours long.
Oh my God.
So when the stakes are real,
and then once the ones are out, I mean,
yeah,
it's a tough watch.
The ball, it seems like the ball drops, like the clock stops constantly when the ones are out. When you
we could do a running clock if you guys want.
Yeah, that's 100% do that. All right, yeah. So like I said, we'll circle back. We'll talk about all this stuff as and I'm sure these depth charts are in pencil, and as the practices happen, and Kyle's got his eye on these scenarios, and the practice could be a part where they go, okay, like this guy might actually be better for this spot, and so those things could even happen sometimes before the games actually start. So that'll be something we can follow as well.
We didn't have any offensive guy because I'm one who I don't really think that whatever you want to call it, that 1A or QB2, I don't really think I don't believe that is like a competition, but I know some people disagree. There are someone who are on the Darnold train, but I don't see it. But so we're gonna find out here in 10 days if Sam Darnold really has an opportunity to be I guess it would be quarterback 2. And since I guess are we still seeding quarterback 1 to Brock? I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's just that is it's a really interesting quarterback situation that where some people are saying that Brock is quarterback 1, and as far as I know, that he still hasn't even been cleared yet. So I mean,
can't wait for the Grant Cohn tweet. Brock Purdy's thrown 4 wobblers in a row, and then
that guy is such a troll. Oh my God. I mean, he's not my taste, but he is really good at his job. What he does it really well, because I know he is really able to tweak me and push my buttons. So good on him for that.
Other people too, like some people who are a lot bigger than him. um, I think the guy on offense who's got the bullseye on his back is McKivitz. Like there's already scenarios out there where people are saying, I think it's actually Grant Cohn. I saw Larry Krueger responded to him. I think Grant Cohn said, no team has Super Bowl aspirations if they have Colt McKivitz as it was something like that, right?
Wow.
And then
shots fired.
And then Krug said he said something else. I can't remember what the tweet was, but so yeah, like that's all. He's got the bullseye on his back, and we're still a whole 10 days away until they put the pads on. So
yeah.
All right, let's talk about this podcast that I mentioned only because I saw that Kyle Shanahan himself was at the top of this little graphic here, and it's called the Playcallers. And I forget the woman's name who does. I'll find her name because she does a really, really, really good job.
I think it's Jordan Rodriguez.
Yes,
I think that's right.
Yes, she's. I think she covers the Rams maybe for the Athletic, but
I am so glad you pointed it out to me because I saw it in my feed.
Yeah,
I saw the podcast, but I did not see the graphic. So I had, put it on the back burner as something to listen to. And then once you mentioned it and I pulled it up and saw what was going on there, I immediately started listening to it. And then once I started, I couldn't stop. It was amazing. So go ahead with what you're saying. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, so I've only listened to episode 1, so I don't know if they follow this same story throughout the entire set of episodes. What I found just I found all of these guys openly contributed to this podcast. All of these guys have to understand that they look like maniacs in this podcast because of how obsessive they are about their jobs. And Kyle, I think, is the most out of everybody, how obsessed he is about this. He even had a quote in episode 1 where he was saying, on my deathbed, I'm going to think about my family, but very close second is football and play calling. Like that's how obsessed he is with this. And he has been since he was a little kid. It almost became kind of a narrative for him of a blueprint to follow. Like sports became the end goal, and it kind of shaped his work ethic. Just the idea of, having this goal to achieve and having a schedule and knowing, I'm not the fastest or the strongest, so I have to just work harder than everybody else. And that has actually become who he is as a coach. And so the story is basically Kyle working for his father, or actually this was even before. He was in Houston, and he had some coaches underneath him, and they were all young guys. And these guys were not in the greatest positions necessarily because they were starting from the bottom. And then as they grew and they followed Kyle to the next job, which was in Cleveland, and just the way that they were able to establish themselves, like Mike McDaniel, who is now with Miami, he was saying how, he is not the type of guy to puff out his chest about certain things. Like he doesn't need to be the best marketer out of everybody as far as showing how smart he was. And he kind of threw Sean McVay under the bus a little bit by saying that's kind of who Sean was. But in Sean's defense, I had a boss one time say, no one is going to be a better advertiser for you than you. And so that's kind of how I saw Sean, but it's pretty clear that McDaniel kind of, maybe without saying so much, thought Sean was a little bit of a shadow or something. But so what McDaniel did is he saw I forget Chris, what's Chris's last name? The coach who's with the Niners now.
Corrick.
Yeah. And he saw how Corrick had Shanahan's ear without having to be sort of the shadow.
Oh no, Chris Forster.
There you go. And so he decided my avenue to Shanahan is to get close to this other coach who was already close to Shanahan. So that the whole thing of them being coaches together was a fascinating story. But like I said, I've only listened to the first episode, and the first episode ends with the story of RG3 and how they really shaped their offense around him as a quarterback, and they utilized things that he did very well in college, and a lot of it was to his detriment because it just made him available to be hit a lot, and he gets hurt. They go on this run, he gets hurt, and then he tries to play hurt, and he basically ends the podcast by saying, I wish there was somebody who could have protected me from myself because I was going to play for the vets and so, I was going to play no matter what, even though I was hurt. And that kind of derailed his career. So that's how episode 1 ended. What were your thoughts on that first episode? But also, I think you've heard more than I have. So how does that, like, what am I going to listen to for these next few episodes?
Well, Kyle is through it without, because he is like the head of this whole snake, and his influence on all the other guys is kind of fascinating, because basically what it ends up happening is you got 5 episodes and 4 of them so like episode 1 is kind of Shanahan centric, and then you got there's one that's kind of McVay centric, and then LaFleur centric, and then McDaniel, and then the last one is kind of a recap of what we've heard throughout. So episode 1 is the most Kyle centric one.
Okay.
And some of the things that I found fascinating, coming all the way back to the beginning, and you touched on a lot of it, is that people talk about like nepotism.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, some of the opportunities that Kyle has gotten have been directly related to the fact of what his last name is. But what he has done with those opportunities is what makes it special. I go all the way back to his first job as offensive quality control in Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
And number one, that staff was amazing. You had, Gruden and Barry and Tomlin and Monty Kiffin and Raheem Morris and Rob Marinelli, just a lot of football minds. And Kyle, his job in that space was to rewrite and write out all of John Gruden's offense. So that was his introduction to the NFL. But he would go the extra step and spent as much time as he could in those defensive meetings, with those great Tampa Bay teams, with Tomlin and Marinelli and Kiffin, and soaking up as much as he could on that part of it. And that's something that I kind of knew in my mind, but hearing Kyle talk about it and just the way he talked, it's like it drove home the point that great coordinators have to know as much about the other side of the ball as they do about their side of the ball. So Kyle knows as much about defense as he does about offense.
And that's also a Belichick thing, right? Like that's
his job is, his gift is cracking defenses.
Mm-hmm.
And another one of the great stories in this podcast is, for the longest time, that Seattle style of defense, with the cover 3, Legion of Boom style defense, was proliferating and killing in the NFL. And his mission in life was to crack it. And then once he got hired in Atlanta, and what's my man's name? The defensive coordinator now in Dallas, whatever his name is, he's the head coach in Atlanta. And so he got to practice against that defense every day, and basically cracked the Seattle defensive shell. And he's like, you learn all these things playing against it daily, and where the stakes are low, that you just, there's certain things you can't pick up just watching tape. And just the whole cat and mouse of it that these guys play with, the offense makes a gain and the defenses catch up, and then the defenses, so it's always like an arms race to see, who can get a leg up on one another. And then another thing that's fascinating to me is this, how incestuous this whole football thing is. Everybody has, there's no way that there's like a 6 degrees of separation between all these guys. All of them, have either worked with each other directly, or there's somebody working for them that has worked with somebody that has worked. They're all connected in these really strange ways, and especially in Kyle's little circle, with McVay and McDaniel and LaFleur. Those guys are all super competitive with each other. Personally, as aside from their teams. So it's like, she was our interviewer was talking about, there were some questions she would ask that they wouldn't answer because she knew that the other guys were going to hear what they said. So they didn't want it to, they didn't want to be giving up any, like this particular question was, what's next in offensive innovation? And nobody wanted to be say what they thought. They're all, I don't know. Wouldn't that be good to know? But yeah, I believe, I think I tweeted that out as soon as I started listening to it. Definitely episode 1. If you're a 49er fan, I think you'll learn a lot about our coach and how he is wired by listening to the whole show, but particularly episode 1.
Yeah, I loved it, and I'm not necessarily I'm not like a football outsiders guy to the point of where they're trying to explain something, but the explanation is just as complex as it. Like, I like it when you have smart people who can kind of put it in more casual language, though. That I was so interested in what they were saying. They were talking in coach speak. They were talking in football speak, and I didn't feel like I was lost in any way. And maybe it's because it was Shanahan and I was so interested because it was him. But the whole thing, the competitiveness, the how all 4 guys are running teams now is tremendous. It just shows that, the networking possibilities out there are there. And like you said, man, if you really put the work in and you and you blossom, then you're in a good opportunity. But there was another thing that they said where Kyle, and this is what I want to ask you about as far as like a boss, Kyle as a boss. I forget who said it. Maybe it was the Jordan. I think she said something to the effect of, Kyle, he is very, like, if you come to him with something, you better be able to anticipate all the questions that he's going to ask you about that thing. And he's going to be very vocal if you don't know what he's thinking, or what are some of the possible solutions to your thing. Man, imagine just the trepidation that some of these guys would have, coming to him, and he would just be airing them out. Like, I'm sure in the NFL, the coaching styles, in some instances, that's kind of like a survival thing. It's just so cutthroat, and you have to be wired in that way. But I work in the Silicon Valley, and there's some craziness going on there. And I've been around, Kyle's not the CEO, but he's the CEO of the football field. I've been around CEOs where they will just light people's asses up. and you're kind of demeaned, and you kind of got to leave with your tail between your legs. Then you got to come back and sort of, redo that relationship, knowing what happened the last time. That is like a crazy management style. And it just showed me like, man, I'm so thankful that I don't have any football acumen to
Yeah, and
want to
see,
even go into that
and that
avenue.
the wild part about it is that there's like two sides to that coin. Is like these guys, in particular these three guys, they when they were working for Kyle, the pinnacle for them was for him to call something that they brought to him and
Yeah.
he installed. So
Right.
I mean, that is what all of them want. But then there's the other side of that is to get there, you're going to have to bring it to him,
Yeah.
and then you're going to have to undergo this interrogation about what it is that you've brought to him, and you've got to survive that. So I'm not saying what I want to. I'm getting. It's kind of circular in that to get what you want, you got to go through this this ring of hell to get there. So, but you don't want to not do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's just weird. And I mean, I don't know. And I took it kind of like that he is open to your suggestions, but you just have to know that it better be really, really well thought out. And you better have thought about, well, what about if this happens? What about if that happens? What about if this happens? All the way down the line, because that's where they all said that's where he's gonna go with it. They all know that when they bring something to him, he is gonna dissect it. He's gonna take it all the way down to its core.
Yep.
And wants you to know that that what you are suggesting and all of the ramifications for it. And that was something that LaFleur said, specifically said that, they're the same age, and they were like, people were, he had heard all the whispers about this, offensive genius. He's like, he's my age. I mean, how much could he possibly know? And he was like, it was like they had an interaction similar to this, and he said he was like blown away, and he was like, oh shit, I really got to get my shit together, because this dude he thinks about things that I would have never even considered. And we're talking about, this is when they're like 25, 26 years old. We're 20 years ago now. He's just he is really, really, Kyle is all in on this coaching thing.
Oh yeah. I want to end with the RG3 thing, because I want to get your perspective, because you were watching football at that time and you remember that very clearly. And Kyle's got a little bit of a rep because of that moment. The only other thing I wanted to mention is the other thing, because you and I are both sons. And when Kyle said that he thought his dad was one of the best coaches in the world, and then when they fired him, he had to actually have this conversation with himself about, does that mean my dad's like not the best coach in the world? Like that, he said that really killed him to have to think that way. I thought that was great as well. But we'll move on to the RG3 thing, because they ended that, I'm sure, for a reason. RG3 was very nice about his situation. I imagine he probably feels a certain way, but he's a successful guy now in the media, in doing commentary and doing analysis and stuff. So he's been able to move on in a very good way. But the way that they ended this podcast was RG3 basically hurting his knee, playing on it and hurting it more, and it kind of derailing his career. And he ends it by saying, I would have not have done it the same way. I wish there was somebody who would have told me not to. And the team had gotten, Washington had gotten some fines for maybe not being as truthful on the injury report as they were supposed to be. And a lot of this, and I'm not saying like this was all Kyle's fault, because Kyle is not the big boss at this time. But it just kind of made you think a little bit about the Trey Lance situation last year, in that, in trying to take advantage of what this QB's strengths are. At the same time, there's a risk in that, which is opening him up to being hit in a way that he wouldn't necessarily be hit in the pocket. And so, I think we all kind of talked about it last year. Whose fault was it? Was it, and we kind of came to the solution, or to the explanation, that Kyle's trying to get this guy to have some successes. And part of that is because of how fast he is and how much he can run. And so he's trying to open up these avenues so that maybe they're expecting him to run, and then that opens up the pass a little bit more. RG3 was talking about that a little bit in the offense that they built around him. And so what did you think about that last piece of the show? And what's the culpability there for the team and the player and the coaches and the training staff? And, the doctor said that he wasn't given a chance to say whether or not the player was too hurt to come back on the field. Like, there's a lot of stuff I'm sure that teams learned about through that scenario, but it didn't necessarily paint the Shanahans in the greatest light to end that episode.
Yeah. I mean, that is always the dirty side of this business, is that there's a lot. There's two things that I want to say. We'll start here, but then it kind of dovetails and leads into another thing that I found really fascinating. I can't remember if it was this episode before, but there's a desire for all of us to say it's that guy's fault. I mean, we're kind of wired that way. We want to be able to blame that guy or that person, when in all of these decisions there are a bunch of people who are culpable. And I get that, as I used to always say when I was a manager that ultimately, I'm responsible regardless of whether or not, I'm accountable regardless of whether or not I'm responsible. And in this case, Mike Shanahan is accountable for what happened. Who did the doctor tell him? Was the doctor allowed to speak as truthfully as he could be, or should have been? Or did he feel like he needed to answer in a way that was pleasing to the boss? I get it. He's a young man, but there's a certain level of accountability that Robert Griffin has for his own health and well-being. If he felt like he couldn't go, then, I say, even as I say it, I know how hard that is for a player in his position to do, because as he talked about, it's not just for him. He felt like he was playing for Fletcher Cox and Santana Moss and those vets on the team, that he felt like this was their best chance to get to the ultimate goal.
And before 49er fans go, oh, that sounds like it's not hard of a decision, we are the same fan base who wanted Brock Purdy to go out there and try and throw left-handed when he got his shoulder, elbow destroyed.
Exactly. So we're not talking about people making rational decisions.
Yeah.
So I do believe that there is enough blame to go around, but I think the things are definitely better now than they were then, just in terms of injury reporting. And I do believe that there is a conscious effort to keep these dudes safer. And they don't, it seems to me that they aren't as objectified. I mean, there's a lot that is going on, in terms of we seem to be listening about these dudes and their mental struggles and that part of it. It just seems to be a better environment, but I just don't think that you're ever going to. I think RG3 is right, is that there needs to be an adult in the room, and somebody needs to be looking out and advocating for the player. And we talk about Kyle and the doctor. Where was the NFLPA on Robert Griffin's side? If advocating for him if he was truly so. But I mean, but now, as I say that, how do they know exactly the details of what's going on in that building in that short condensed period of time to be able to do anything about it? So like I say, all we can do is try to do better. But that was, like you say, that was a really, really sobering moment. But another thing that I really loved, and then we can move on. Mike McDaniel, who is just a really, really smart. He's a really smart dude and a really introspective dude. He's had some struggles. I mean, if you listen to the podcast, you'll hear about his journey and what has led him to where he is. But he said something that it is really applicable to us as fans, is that the play caller always gets the shit for if a play doesn't work.
Yep.
And it's ridiculous because obviously his play design is based upon these 11 guys doing their job. And those 11 guys doing their job is based on those position coaches imbuing the skills in those guys to do those jobs. So for anybody to say on any one play that it's that guy's fault, I mean, it's just ridiculous on its face. There's always plenty of culpability to be had, to be in blame passed around, just like that's why he said his belief is that it's ridiculous that we give play callers too much credit when things go right and they get too much blame when things go wrong, because all of those decisions that they make and all those plays that they call, if they go right or if they go wrong, there are a lot of people involved in making that happen.
I mean, isn't that Kyle's whole reputation from the Super Bowl? Like,
yeah,
that's if he wins that game, he may not even have been able, the 49ers may not have been able to get him because
he's probably the Rams coach.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
And they go into that here also is in that.
I can't wait for that.
Yeah. In that how the whole McVay Shanahan thing, how McVay gets hired, because basically Kyle doesn't take the Atlanta interview. He doesn't make himself available. I mean, he doesn't take the LA interview. He, for whatever reason, they never really go into detail on exactly why he didn't. But he basically just decided he wasn't going to make himself available to them. And and then McVay swooped in, and McVay interviewed here, and it was widely believed he was supposed to meet here for an hour. And I can't remember who told this story. He's supposed to be here an hour, and it goes 3, and then 4, and then it's like, holy shit! The Rams are like sweating bullets because their thought is they might not even get a shot. At McVay. That the 49ers might have been, and there's that whole connection between McVay and the 49er organization to begin with. So they were really concerned that he might not leave, that they might not let him out of the building. But then they did, and then it goes on that story. But it's very interesting how that whole thing could be different. McVay could have been here. Kyle could have been in LA. Like I say, the whole thing is really incestuous.
And I'll end here, and we've already been talking for 70 minutes, so we'll end the show as well. But it also made me believe, actually, that if Kyle Shanahan gets a Super Bowl or 2, that he's actually going to be in the upper echelon historically of coaches, not only for winning the Super Bowl, but also for influencing the younger style coaches. Because I don't remember if it was on this podcast or not, but they were basically saying that, and you've said this in the past, that essentially everybody runs a version of Kyle Shanahan's offense.
Yeah. I mean,
and so the influence alone is just felt throughout the entire league. So That's what I came out of this thinking is, you know what? If Kyle does get that Super Bowl, Bill Walsh and Bill Belichick and guys like that are kind of at the on the Mount Rushmore. And he may not get there just because he's not an old man yet, right? And his influence is still being felt, and it'll still be felt for many, many years. But he could be in that level of people at the end of the day. So that was the last thing, and I would have never thought about it that way before I listened to that podcast in that same way that I thought about it.
And 100%. And you are, I mean, it sounds blasphemous, but his influence, offensive influence at this point in his career, he's had just about as much as the West Coast offense did in the way that the game, like fundamentally 40 years later, the fundamentals of everything that happens in football right now, you can go right back to Bill Walsh's building a champion. The foundational elements of his offense, the fingerprints are on everything you see from Pee Wee football all the way up to Sundays. And I don't think it's hyperbole to say that 40 years from now, we'll be talking about Shanahan and his influence in those similar terms. I mean, it's just,
if you and me are talking about that 40 years from now, then
yes,
we're doing really good.
That's my goal. Thanks, man. This has been awesome. It's always a pleasure, and I just can't wait till we get back to weekly.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be good. But no, this was great. I'm glad that I was able to check this show out because I resisted a little bit just because is it gonna be too much X's and O's and nerdy stuff, which I can get into, but sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, it's a little bit of a not so active of a listen because I'm kind of doing multiple things.
Right.
And sometimes I'll go, oh no, I gotta rewind 10 minutes because
yeah.
But the way that the reporter put this thing together was so fantastic as well. So shout out to her.
Such a great job.
And shout out to these guys for, being as frank as they could be without giving away their stuff. So yeah, I think 49er fans would like it and football fans would like it as well. So we'll be back in a couple weeks and we'll have some actual training camp stuff to talk about, which will be good. And then, by the time we come back next week, it will be like only another week and change until games start. So we'll have to figure out what we want to do for preseason games because there could be enough things to talk about, to do weekly shows for the pregame or for the preseason, or there's not a lot coming out of those. So we'll sort of have to figure out after the first one. But I think it probably makes sense to try and come back, if not that night, like the next day or something for the first preseason game.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you to everyone who was checking in with us, whether it was on our YouTube channel or on the podcast feed. For Rod, I am Double G. We will see you when we see you. Peace out.